everybody, and welcome back to the workshop. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the workshop, and that's it. No need to stop us real quick to talk about something important. It's very serious, actually. Drugs. They're bad for you. But you know what's not bad for you? Building a Squarespace website. In fact, building a Squarespace website is fun, easy, useful. It's a great way to capture an audience and show them your portfolio of work, which is incredibly important if you have tools like this. Because here's the thing, tools are cool, and if you're using tools, you're probably making cool stuff, and if you're making cool stuff, it's good to be able to show people. Now, social media is great. Facebook and Instagram and YouTube are great places to get your name out there. But even with all of those things, it's still incredibly important to have a professional place to be able to divert an audience of customers or just people who like your work. And Squarespace makes it incredibly easy to have galleries, to sell products, to have member-only areas that you can curate a tighter, more intimate conversation with the people who are interested in it. Their pre-planned website layout is really easy to use, even if you're not a computer person like me. This is about as technical as I like to get with machines. Unfortunately, I have to use computers for my day-to-day work. I'm not very good at it, but I was still able to do it using Squarespace's website building platform. So you can go to squarespace.com/Will Stelter for 10% off your first purchase or a website domain when you use code Will Stelter. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring today's episode. With that, let's keep on talking about machines. Now, it's been about a year and a half since I did a shop tour video. At the time, the shop was fairly empty, and I've added a lot of things and kind of organized and moved things around since then. This area of the shop, the entryway, I don't really show on camera a whole lot because I don't really do very much out here. I've got a large pile of cardboard that needs to go to the recycler. I've got the hammer killer. I've got my little power hammer that you guys saw me pick up. Some other random stuff over here, wrenches, my little drill press. Really not a whole lot of exciting stuff. The doorway to the office is over there, and I haven't used the office for anything except for storage in like 6 months. But let's start off in the corner over here and then move our way forward talking about all these machines. So starting off in the very corner here, we have the October of 1915 Reed 109 283-pound bench vise. This thing is a whale. This thing is super rare. There are 6 Reed 109s with the 3-foot configuration known to exist. So this thing is super rare. I found it local. I'm very excited to get to do a full restoration series on this and then have this behemoth be put back to work. Back here we have a motor. This is a 5-horse 855 RPM motor that I found local to go and drive the little power hammer. They originally came with a 5-horse 850 RPM motor, but I can't be that picky when looking for a period correct motor. I can't believe I found one as close to the correct RPM as I did. So then moving forward, I'm standing underneath my gantry crane. This is a 2,000-pound capacity gantry crane, which basically means it's a giant C that sits like this. You got a carriage that goes back and forth between the 2 posts, and I have a 4,000-pound capacity or 2-ton trolley and a 4,000-pound capacity chain hoist as well. A chain hoist is a very efficient way to be able to move material up and down. You basically have a great gear reduction so that you can move things very easily with this chain up and down, and it can lift very heavy things very easily. It's how I've moved a lot of the machines and heavy stuff in here to try and help my back from being too injured. I still hurt it doing stupid stuff, but not that stupid of stuff. Moving forward, we have the ram for the Bowden number 2 power hammer. This is 94 pounds with the dies, and then we have all of the pieces that make up the linkage to be able to get this hammer to run. I'm very excited to get onto that project. And I did do a video rundown of the whole thing, so you can go ahead and click up here. Nope, no, you moved it. You moved it up. Moving forward, we have the couch. This is for sitting. And then I have a shelf here. The bathroom's back there. I've got my handle material over here. So all blocks of wood and micarta and synthetics and carbon fiber and all sorts of fun stuff. Here I got all my wrenches over there. Some other fun stuff hanging on the wall. A decorative chain hoist here. A hog splitter there. Here a tool there. And then once we make it through the giant doorway here, this was a 7-foot doorway, so it was like right there, which is a ridiculous thing for a door. And I physically couldn't fit the power hammer through here with that door being so small, so I bumped it up to about 11.5 feet tall, put in a new header, and then my friend Josh Skoglund from Explore Games did all the trim work here in this super cool Chatsubu burned wood. It looks awesome. Back here, I've got sauces and paints and most of the things you don't want to put in your body because they would kill you. Anyway, we got the chalkboard back there, some other sauces down here, and then moving on, we got the motor tower for the Beaudry. I just slipped the belt on the drive wheel. I tightened it down a little bit too much, and so my main drive belt is sitting right here and not up there where it should be. But I drove over to Spokane and picked up all the steel for this. The giant wheel up there came locally here from Montana. The other wheel came from Butte, Montana. I found it on Facebook Marketplace. It had to be the exact right size, and I found it. So the pillow blocks, which are these right here, kind of the bearings that the main shaft sits in, I got these in Idaho. I was driving past a place and I thought, they look like they would have stuff, and so I pulled over. Turns out the guy had the exact right stuff for it. So we got Idaho, Montana, different part of Montana, and then all the steel came from Washington. The motor came from Wyoming from my friend Kevin Willey. The paper pulley that drives it was custom made at a shop that still makes these paper pulleys for antique machines just like this. And so it's cool that I got to cobble all of those things together from different places. Moving on, we have the Beaudry number 11 power hammer. I think in the last video, this thing was sitting like right here. There's a giant hole in the ground. I've since filled in that hole with 17,000 pounds of concrete and restored the hammer completely. It does great now. It is a monster. It's still kind of all settling in. The wood is compressing and everything still moves around a little bit, but as time goes on, this hammer will settle in and it'll get even better. Aging like fine cheese. So this thing is doing great and it looks beautiful. It looks so good. It's nearly impossible to get the actual scale of the hammer on camera. Literally every single person that has ever seen a photo of this hammer and then come to the workshop says, oh my, that hammer's a lot bigger than I thought it was. Without fail, every single person that has seen the hammer on camera says that. It's pretty comical. And then over here we got the chalkboard wall, all kinds of good quotes. We got the cross of Jesus. Bunch of scripture on the wall, some office quotes, and a bunch of pictures of knives. Then moving on down here, we've got a little 100-pound Trenton anvil. It's actually a Lakeside, so they made it for a hardware store. It's been kind of beat up and whatnot, but I found it local for a good price, and so I bought it. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to use it for yet, but it's here. And then moving on over here, we have my 25-pound little giant. I bought this locally here for $500 3 or 4 years ago now, and it's just a champ. It's kind of beat up. It's got brazing on the arms and on the pitman, and everything's kind of rattly on it and whatnot, but it does just great. I haven't had a problem with it since the day I got it. I keep it super, super oily, which it likes. It's serial number 2021. It was originally bought by the Galata Municipal Ironworks up in northern Montana in 1917, and it seems like it stayed in Montana its whole life, which is awfully cool. Over here, we've got the 400-pound Coleslaw London pattern anvil. This thing is a straight hog. I made a video about restoring this anvil. My friend Jason from Fireball Tools also did a video about milling it flat and talking about the anvil, so if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out these videos. Moving on back here, we've got the twisting machine. This thing puts out 7,300 inch-pounds of torque from these adjustable chucks, and so you have to make up different dies to fit the bars into, but once you do that, it's really easy to plug in the dimensions that you want it forged down to in the press and get them prepped perfectly for all sorts of twisting goodness. It does a really good job of even, tight twisting. It is a huge help in the workshop. I love multi-bar Damascus for its kind of directionality and the ability to play around with that, and so this is a really good tool for exploring that avenue of pattern welding. Then moving on over here, we have the 25-ton Cole Ironworks press with their digital controller. This machine is going to get its own video. I've got plenty of time behind it and I absolutely love it already, but we're going to wait a little while longer to do a video on it. But basically, this is like the Rolls-Royce of forging presses. It is super controllable, it's very easy to use, and it moves a lot of steel. In fact, it moves steel at a similar rate to the giant power hammer, except it weighs not 8,500 pounds, and it takes up a much smaller footprint, and you can run it in a home shop. The difference between these two is that the big hammer can move steel and it keeps heat in the steel for a little while longer. While you can work similar size chunks of steel, you can work it for longer per heat on the hammer, which is why I have it. Absolutely amazing. I love to use the two in conjunction because I can get things very precisely forged on this down the exact right dimension, make sure that they're all the same. These are some custom made H13 combo dies that they made. So there's a big wide, I don't know, probably 6-inch radius on this side, and then a nice big flat on that side, which is great. Moving on, we have my 1917 150-pound Trenton. This is a great anvil. I got this probably 4 years ago now. It's swell. I love it. Crisp edges, great rebound, absolute little tank of an anvil. Now I know what you're thinking, and that's, Will, you're only one man. Why would you need 2 anvils? And the thing is that I use this for different stuff than I use that for. I love this anvil. It's great. But sometimes I need to have a smaller anvil, a thinner face, a tighter radius on the horn, a really, really crisp edge. That's what got some really, really kind of sharp edges here. And sometimes this is just the right anvil for the job when this one isn't exactly what I need. I'd say probably 85% of the forging that I do on here, but sometimes I use this guy. When there's multiple people in here forging, it's really nice to have a second anvil as well. So that's the reason for the 2 anvils. Moving forward, we have my Dave Lish forge. I bought this thing when I was 16 years old, and it's just been a tank. I haven't relined it. I haven't done anything to it. I've gone through a lot of fire bricks. I'm getting very close to needing to reline it. It is a very efficient forge. It'll run at forge welding temperature for a very long time on a 100-pound tank. You probably get like 30 hours of forge welding out of a 100-pound tank. It's awesome. Over here I have a little hammer and tong rack that I fabricated in Alec's shop right after we bought this place. And so I've got all my custom made forging hammers on this side, all my tongs on this side, and then a 5-inch Colombian post vise right here that I honestly don't use this vise a whole lot anymore because I have this guy, and this is my Reed 108. It was built in March of 1946, which is awesome. It's super, super old. It is just a little bit older than Steve Schwarzer. Hard to believe that they even had ironworking capabilities back then, but they did. And this thing is awesome. It's 250 pounds, and I put these jaw covers on it, and I can forge on this thing like nobody's business. It has nice parallel closing jaws, and so on a post vise the jaws open like this and close like that, but on a bench vise they open and close parallel, and so it's really nice for that sort of thing. It's a very flat surface that you're forging on as well, and when you tighten it down it sounds like you're forging on an anvil. The vise is 250 pounds, the stand is 410 pounds for a grand total of 660 pounds. There's a full video on the restoration of this vise as well, and it kind of travels around, it floats around in kind of this area here depending on if I'm using it while doing like the finish work of knife making or forging. It does kind of all those tasks. It holds things so ridiculously securely. It is a great tool to have in the shop. I don't know how I didn't have one of these. I had it sitting around on the floor for like 3 years before I got around to actually restoring it, and I feel like I wasted some time because it is great to have. And then moving over here, we've got my main workbench. This is where I do the vast majority of my clean work, my fit up, my filing, my sanding, my hand sanding anyway. My other sanding goes on in other places. A lot of stuff happens right here. I've got all of my tools, basically all of my hand tools are right here. We've got my main bench vise. This is a Reed 405. It's probably from the late 40s, maybe early 50s, based off what I can tell. I've got my Trojan horse knife vise in here. This thing spins around like so, and then clamp your blade in there. You can move it back and forth in the vise itself. And so I have a lot of adjustability in what I hold in here and how I hold it and the angle that it's at, which is really important when you're contouring handles and doing all sorts of fun stuff like that. We've got a couple camera lenses here. Got speaker, my Blade Show Best Kitchen Knife Award, a pipe tobacco thing that said Edgeworth on it, which I thought was kind of cool. And then moving on down here, I've got my Klingspor shop roll. So this is sandpaper that you pull out of that roll and then you can tear it up into little pieces and shoe shine with it and whatnot. Then I just got random tools and stuff like that all throughout here. Some of my fancier materials are in there. And then over here, I've got all of my regular Indaza Rhino Wet Redline sandpaper. Up here, I've got my sanding sticks, my broaches, and a lot of the hand tools that I use a lot when I'm doing all of my like kind of fine fit up work. Down here, I have a 26-pound Sodafor's Swedish cast steel anvil. This thing is awesome. It's a great little bench anvil. It's really nice to have something solid to kind of hammer on and whatnot, and the fact that it's a little mini version of a full-sized anvil, I love. I've got a Prentice jeweler's vise down here. It was a swivel jaw. It's been repaired and brazed back, so now it is a fixed jaw, which is kind of sad, but it's still very cool. It's a great looking little vise. It's a lot of fun to use, and it is very useful to have something set a different level from up here. Up here, it's kind of right at eye level, and sometimes I need something just a little bit lower down, or I need to hold two things at the same time, and that's where this comes in handy. I've got my pencils and scissors and office supplies in there. I've got camera equipment in there. Jeweler saws are in there, and then there's all sorts of other stuff. Files on a magnetic strip here. All of my common, like use it all the time, knife sauces are back here. So super glue, oil, WD-40, etching solution, super glue, waxes, all that stuff sits back here. I've got this. This is good. This is a Caddy automatic hand micrometer, and so it's got that very cool gauge on it, and it lifts up and you can measure stuff like that, which is just the niftiest, and I just had to have it. I've got another vise up here just for aesthetic purposes. I never use it. I have a gun. I have lots of guns, but this one is old.
It's actually not even a firearm.
Legally, it's not a gun. No, it is not technically a firearm. It was made by Steve Schwarzer in 1982. This barrel is made out of Twisted W's patterned Damascus with a 4140 liner in it, which is as cool as it sounds. It's a flintlock pistol, and I need to finish it up. So if you guys want to see this get finished up, drop a comment down below. And then moving on down here, I have all sorts of stuff. I've got a lot of my hand working tools, other random stuff, hammers and screwdrivers and other bigger stuff, file card, all that stuff is down in here in a big old jumble. And then over here, I really don't use this bench a whole lot. I will more in the future when I have a better place to put it. But I've got another little vise here. This is a forged jeweler's vise. It's probably from the mid 1800s, maybe a little bit earlier. They kind of transitioned to this style for jewelers right around that time. But it's super cool. It was given to me by Matt Harris, my friend over in Maryland. This bench is a nice thick butcher block made out of reclaimed barnwood. I've got my Erie number 1C bench vise here, and I use this most often right now for glue ups. It's a great spot to glue up a knife very close by, but kind of still out of the way, and so that's mostly what I use it for. I've got my microscope. I've got my favorite scarf. That's a joke. It's a hat. I'm just teasing. It's a tie. No. This was a snake that was sitting in the doorway of the shop, and it tried to kill Marty, and so I killed it first. And then moving on back here, got a lot of like power hammer parts and just random junk back there. My air compressor, my sandblaster, and my bandsaw right here. Then moving on over here, I have tons of material. I've got micarta and steel and tubing and all sorts of stuff. We have random up top. We have hardware on this level, so wire nuts, screws, cotter pins. And down here, I've got a lot of my like random scraps of pattern weld, so Damascus stock down here, some other random steel and titanium down there. This doesn't have a whole lot of organization. There's steel, there's copper, there's bronze, there's ironwood, and then down below is truly random stuff. Bunch of junk down there. Over here, we've got knife steel, we've got regular mild steel, we've got tool steel. I know what everything is. Most of it's labeled, some of it's not. And then over here, this is my fabrication table. This is a Rhino cart from Strong Hand Tools, and this thing is just swell. It's super, super nice. They hooked me up with it, and it's been a huge blessing to have a good flat welding table for the fabrication that I've done in the shop and for all sorts of other weird stuff. You never know when you're gonna need to have a flat surface to work on, and this thing is awesome. I've used it to bend stuff, use it for all sorts of stuff. I really, really like this. If you do fabrication, having a good fabrication table is cash money. And then moving on over here, we have a vise from Fireball Tools. This is just one of their little I don't know what they call it, like a fabricator's vise or something like that. And this indexes, you can put it anywhere you want on the table. These are all the fixins that go with the table. We've got like the lockdowns and like all sorts of stuff. I just bumped the table and a lot of it fell down. So I need to clean all that up, but it's happy where it's at right now. This vise right here, I picked up in February in Colorado. It's an Athol number 45, which is a coachmaker's vise, and a coachmaker's vise is basically a sheet metal, very similar to a filer's vise, where these jaws come up really pointy at the top. And so you can file at aggressive angles, you can bend stuff in it, you basically have less jaw in the way. It's also a swivel jaw, which means that this back jaw adjusts so you can hang on to tapers with it. So say you want to hold on to this piece right here, wham bam, look at that, and hold on to it. And another really cool thing about this vise that's very uncommon with American vices is that it's actually a quick release vise. And so you lift up on the front of the slide, you move it and drop it back down. Super, super cool vise. I'd like to do a restoration series on this. I did a little bit of work on it already, getting the swivel pin unstuck from it. It needs a lot more work before it'll be fully functional and it finds a permanent place to live in the shop. Over here, I've got my quenching oils. I did a video on making these, but I've got Parks 50 and AAA. This is a faster quenching oil. This is a slower quenching oil. And I've got a good couple gallons in each of these nice wide 6-inch tubes, which so far has been a good size for everything that I've needed it for. I've got my Vulcan MIG Max 215. Harbor Freight hooked me up with this, and quite frankly, it's been great. There have been a couple times when I needed a little bit more heat and just a bigger welder in general, but it hasn't been a problem for anything else that I've used in the shop, but you're gonna run into that issue no matter what welder you get. It's been a very reliable, very easy to use welder for me. I'm a huge fan, especially at the price point. They're a good value for your money. And then over here we have an even heat. It's a KO 27, so the Ken Onion series with a 27-inch internal chamber, and this thing freaking rocks. Into the machining area. This is not a machining machine unless you're an absolute Chad. This right here is my torch, and so you can cut with it, you can heat stuff up with it. It's pretty nifty. And then behind it is the Airco 300 AC/DC square wave stick and TIG welder. The high frequency start on the TIG doesn't work, so I'm gonna get rid of this machine as well. Overall, it is a monster stick welder, but I don't do that much big welding, and so it's probably gonna go. And then moving back, I have my 1941 American pacemaker lathe. It's a 14 by 30. That means it can potentially accommodate up to 14-inch material, 30 inches long. It's like 3,000 pounds of material, something ridiculous like that. But it is a hefty machine. It is a 5,100 pound machine. If you were to go out and buy a new 14 by 30 lathe, it would probably weigh about 2,000 pounds, maybe, probably less, probably more like 1,500. It's got these beautiful Art Deco style castings. It's a super smooth machine, but I won't turn it on because the phase converter for it stopped working. And so there's a big hole in the wall where that's supposed to be. Behind me I have my machining cabinet, and so there's like machining tools in here. There's a live center for the lathe, quick change tool post, stuff like that. This is a machinist toolbox that I bought that is full of goodies. There's all sorts of fun stuff in here, like end mills, layout equipment, 1, 2, 3 blocks, readouts. It was a great deal, fairly local. I found it at like 7 o'clock one night, drove an hour to go pick it up, got home nice and late that night, but totally worth it. Jam-packed full of goodies, and like one drawer of end mills is worth about what I paid for the whole thing. So that's cool. We have my 1988 Bridgeport variable speed milling machine. It's got a 2 horsepower motor, and it is just awesome. It's got a 48-inch table, which I think is the largest table that they made. Normally they were 42s, and some of them even had 32-inch tables, so it was rather small compared to this guy. You can cut slots, you can flatten things down, you can drill big holes with it, you can cut angles and steps and do all sorts of crazy stuff. This is one of the most versatile machines in the world. It may not do everything very efficiently, but it does just about everything. Honestly, if you wanted to, you could probably make a whole knife using nothing but just a milling machine. You could cut the bevels, you could profile it, you could drill all the holes for it, you could contour the handle. It would take forever, but you could do it. And then over here, I've got some of my machining stuff. I've got my collets for the milling machine. I've got transfer punches over here. I've got a wee little baby bench vise. I've got a hold down kit, some cutting fluid, spindle oil, stuff like that. And then down below, I've got my Holland number 14. This is the first real bench vise that I bought. And I just threw it on a little mount and mounted it to the wall right here. It's really handy to have a bench vise nearby for deburring parts and just whatever you need it for. It's good to have bench vices everywhere. This is a big old toolbox that I bought right when I first moved in here, and it's got all sorts of stuff in it. I've got Allen keys and screwdrivers and stuff in there. I've got wrenches and a socket set in here. I've got files, drill bits, hardware, taps, machining stuff. It's all in there. It's good. This is my 1958 Dual 36.3. I went and picked this up in Washington back when I was still working for Alec, actually. And it's awesome. It's a super cool machine. It's variable speed. It's got a cool guide for telling you what speeds and feeds and tooth counts and all sorts of stuff for different materials. Everything from aluminum bronze to armor plate to meteorites to boards of asbestos, if you want to cut one of those up. Speaking of asbestos, we have this right here. This is not actually asbestos. This is vintage butterscotch paper micarta. I found this with my buddy Logan Gillihan when I was over visiting Cole Ironworks earlier this year. And then moving back here, I have my clamping and fixtures tree. And so I've got a ton of Strong Hand Tools clamps here. Pretty much anyone will tell you that Strong Hand makes just incredible clamps. They're super overbuilt, very high quality. And then I've got these C clamps as well, and I've got different sizes of all of those. And then up top on the clamping tree, I've got my Fireball Tools squares. So we've got their mega squares, which are the super cool, very classic Fireball shapes. And then I don't know what they call the triangular one, but they're both super handy. I use them for all sorts of stuff. I don't just use them for fabrication. They're useful for a wide variety of things, and I think it's worth having at least a couple of them in just about any shop. We've got a bunch of random wood up here, all sorts of stuff. And then down here I have my buffing machine. I've got an old sharpener that I don't really use anymore. I've got my die filer that I haven't used a whole lot because I haven't had too many projects where I really needed it yet. But I have a couple projects planned where I'm going to use the living daylights out of this thing. And then a little tempering oven down here as well. And then the last area of the shop is the grinding room, which is perhaps the dirtiest room in all of Montana. Maybe not. So I've got my big Prentice number 22 bench vise in here. This is the first big bench vise that I got. It's what made me the way that I am as far as spending way too much money and buying way too many vices goes. It's 168 pounds rear swivel jaw, which is super handy to have in a big grinding vise because it means that I can bring a forged piece in here and hold on to it no matter what the shape is. Really, really nifty. 4 different angle grinders that I use, cut brush, big grinding disc, flat disc, zip disc, and it's nice to have all of those set up so that I usually don't have to switch my grits or my discs or whatever it is. Normally that covers it. Sometimes I do, but it's all right. It doesn't take too long. And then back here I've got my 2x72 Alex Steel Co. belt grinder. This is the kit grinder. I really like this machine. I think it's one of the, if not the best value for your money as far as belt grinders on the market go today. It is very well built and I haven't had too many issues with it. And then behind me I have all of my abrasives. This is all steel cutting abrasives, and then this side down below at least is all wood cutting. And then I've got a couple surface conditioning belts down there as well. Then behind me here I have my grinding attachments. So I've got my small wheels, my 8-inch contact wheel, and my radius 36-inch platen. And then back here, the dirtiest area of the shop, I think right now, this is a real disaster. We cleaned up the rest of the shop a little bit, but we did not come in here, obviously. I've got my abrasive chop saw. This is the 2 horsepower abrasive chop saw. With good blades, it cuts really well. If it doesn't have good blades, it doesn't do so hot, and it currently is not doing so hot because I have just a regular DeWalt blade on there. This is something that fell out from the inside in there. And then I've got back here a 9-inch disc sander from Beaumont Metalworks. This thing is killer. It's variable speed. I like to run it at a very slow speed for the most part. Very rarely am I doing heavy stock removal with a disc. Right now it's got 2000 grit paper on it for sharpening. I like it a lot for sharpening, especially for chef's knives, because it allows you to have a flat surface to sharpen against. And so even with a belt sander, it's really easy to get a recurve in your blade, but that's not going to be an issue if you sharpen open with a disc sander. Then over here I've got a cold cut saw that I need a new blade for because I treated it very poorly and smoked the blade. I like the machines about as much as I like making knives at this point. I love the history behind them, and it's cool that knife makers fall in a category of machines that almost nobody wants, because we can use machines like this that are way too big for a home shop. Like your average Joe Schmo can't fit that in his garage, but industrial shops that would have used that, 75 to 100 years ago, they don't use that sort of thing anymore. And so oftentimes, if you keep an eye out, you can find cool machines at a really good price, because we fall into a category of outdated machines that do what we need them to do because we're making custom one-off parts as artisan craftsmen. We don't need the repeatability of a CNC machine if we're doing our custom pieces. But the quality and the heft and the rigidity of old machines are exactly what suit our needs best, because we're doing something that these machines were made for 100 years ago. And with all of that said, and with all the machines in here, there's still one machine that I don't have yet that almost every knife maker has, and it is a huge surprise that I have 4 power hammers at this shop. The old power hammer, the Fairbanks, the one that I destroyed, is sitting outside. But no surface grinder yet. A surface grinder is basically a machine that has a spindle. It spins a wheel. Usually it's a stone abrasive wheel, and it's spinning right here. And then there's a magnetic chuck that travels back and forth underneath it. You can get things really flat with it. A lot of knife makers like to convert them to belts. So it's running a 2x72 belt with an aluminum or a rubber wheel. And that way you can change your grits and have a little bit more variability there, a little bit more control over the process. And in about 12 hours, I'm gonna hop in my truck and drive on over to Oregon to pick up a surface grinder and do some other fun stuff over there, see some cool shops, some cool power hammers. And I'll be doing a video about that whole process. So I'm very excited to get the last big machine that I really actually need, not just a want, pretty much a need, to kind of round out the shop. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I have lots of fun projects coming up in the next couple months. Some weird stuff, some fun stuff, all sorts of good stuff. Like and subscribe. Drop a comment about any machines that you think I should buy, because quite seriously, I have very little self-control, and if there's a machine I haven't heard about, we'll see. If you guys have any cool trinkets or knickknacks or flags that you would like to see on the walls here, preferably tool related, any cool tools. If you have any mini bench vices, preferably the kind with covered slides, like that little Prentice, go ahead, shoot me an email or send it if you want to see it here in the shop. My P.O. box will be listed in the description down below. Another huge thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's episode, and thank you very much to the patrons for really helping out with making all of this possible. With that, I will see you guys when I get back from Oregon. Bye-bye.